Welcome back, listener. It's me again, broadcasting from the half rotted shack deep in the forgotten mountains of Tohoku. The power flickers a lot, the air smells like dust and old ink, and somewhere outside, I think I hear it again. That faint, malicious laugh. It could be the wind, or it could be her. Ashok Sama. She's been pacing the woods since sundown. But you didn't tune in for ghost stories. At least not tonight. Tonight, we head down to Kyushu, far from here, to a place even some Japanese forget exists. A quiet little corner of Kyushu called Saga Prefecture. Some people may ask, where is Saga? And Saga is on the northwest edge of the Kyushu island. And Kyushu in Japan is considered west, even though it's not west. Like, it is west, but it's not west at the same time. Like, it's south of here, but also west. Uh, like, for example, like Niigata is on the west coast of the Honshu island, but it's not considered west. It is very confusing for us foreigners. But Saga is down there on the west side of Kyushu, and to the north of it is the Genkai Sea, and to the east, northeast of Saga is Fukuoka. You may have heard of Fukuoka. Usually Hakata in Fukuoka is the focal point that people talk about. Hakata ramen is very famous. Hakata Bijin, which is very beautiful women. And then further west of Saga, on the other side of Saga, is Nagasaki. Maybe you've heard of that one. But Saga is quieter. It's older. But it's no less significant. And so maybe you've heard of, well, no, I'm sure you have not. Because if you haven't heard of Saga, then you haven't heard of this. But it is famous for the yakimono or agemono, which like porcelain and like that sort of thing, ceramics. The places Arita and Imari are famous for that. So if you want some really good high-end porcelain or ceramics, you go to Arita and Imari. Imari, I believe, used to be the capital before they changed it to Saga City. But yeah, they got some really good porcelain, and even some of the cannons that were used when Commodore Perry came to Japan in 1853. Some of those cannons that were part of the Shinagawa battery were made in Saga. But Saga isn't only just porcelain and ceramics and that sort of craftsmanship. It's nothing like that. There's more to it. So, long time ago, back during the Sengoku period, the Saga, well, it used to be called Hizen, but then it later changed its name to Saga. But during the Sengoku period, the Nabeshima clan was rulers of Saga. But before them was the Ryujoji clan. And they took over until their head, the leader of the Ryujoji clan, when he died in the in the battle of Okitanawate against the Arima and Shimazu forces in 1584, the Ryujoji clan was in charge of Saga, and then when the that leader of the Ryujoji clan, um, oh, what the hell's his damn name it now? Of course I forget. Takanobu. When he was in charge, um, or when he died, the Nabeshima clan took over, and then so the very first Nabeshima clan member was like Naoshige. He took over and was the first lord of Saga, with the new family. And but what is interesting is this also kind of spawned uh, one of the famous urban legends called the Bakeneko. And the Bakeneko is just like this demon cat. And so the story goes that so after the Nabeshima clan took over, at one point you had so the Ryujoji were now retainers of the Nabeshimas, and so you had Nabeshima Mitsushige, and when he was daimyo of the Saga domain or Hizen province, his retainer Ryuzoji Matashiichiro, he had like betrayed him. I'm not sure. I don't know exactly how, but he betrayed him in some manner, and he straight up killed him. And through that, the the tears of the mother of Mata Shiichiro, her tears turned to blood, and from the blood emerged the Bakeneko. Of course, that defies logic. It makes zero sense from a logical standpoint, but you know how urban legends go. Um, so that's where one of the stories of the Bakeneko comes from. So interesting, and the cat ended up cursing the Nabeshima clan until it was actually later killed itself. Um, so so yeah, you have those types of stories that come from Saga. Um, one of the so you don't only not only have like the ghost story, but also Saga is rooted in political bloodshed. So of course you have that between the Ryuzoji clan and the Nabeshima clan, but also centuries later, you have basically a forgotten rebellion. A lot of Japanese students don't even know about this rebellion called the Saga Rebellion. Um, and it happened in 1874, led by Eto Shinpei. And this was during the Meiji era. And of course, everyone talks about Satsuma Rebellion, which was 3 years later. But it was fought for the same reasons. Saga Rebellion was in 1874. Satsuma was in 1877. And they fought for the same reasons. Both had the same results. But Satsuma gets a lot of recognition. I don't know why. And so Eto Shinpei leads this rebellion. It's very short-lived. So he failed. He died. And actually, so he didn't die at Saga Castle where the surrender was. He ran away looking for help. He was trying to gather forces. He actually went down to Kagoshima to meet with Saigo Takamori, who led the Satsuma Rebellion 3 years later. He goes and talks to him and saying, hey, help us out here. We're trying to fight, the government. And he says no. He's not going to get involved. And then he goes up to Tosu in Kochi. Is that right? Kochi? Yeah. Gets denied there. And that's where he gets caught. And so he gets caught, arrested, and then beheaded. and his head gets put on display. 3 years later, Satsuma happens. Same result, but Satsuma gets a lot of recognition. And also, one other thing in America, we had our own civil war, but a lot of the Confederate leaders were considered, traitors, and I get that um, because they lost. So you have Robert E. Lee, you have statues of him, and you have high schools named after him. It really isn't a big deal, but people in recent years have been making a big deal about it, demanding name changes, demanding his statues torn down because he's considered a traitor. He's not a real American for what he stood for. He fought against the American, the Union. But yet, here in Japan, Saigo Takamori is revered. Like you have statues of him all over the place. They speak very highly of him. But he fought against the government, lost. So I think the comparison is very interesting. Um, so yeah, you have the Forgotten Rebellion basically, um, and then in other aspects of Saga, um, it's people consider it such an irrelevant prefecture because you don't see much come from it, um, aside from what I just told you. Um, Not a lot of anime or um, dramas or movies take place in it. Uh, you do have the anime Zombieland Saga. That's an amusing one. Uh, so you do have that, but for the most part, you don't really get much reference to that. Everything's in bloody Tokyo or Kyoto or Osaka or something, up in Kanto or down in Kansai. So Saga doesn't get much love when it comes to that sort of thing. But you do have a lot of famous people who do come from Saga. One of the more famous ones is Hanawa. He's a singer and I think maybe a comedian. Um, but if you were ever into tokusatsu, which is like, for lack of a better term, just for you know the sake of ease, Japanese Power Rangers, um, or even Kamen Rider, which in America, we had Power Rangers and Masked Rider, um, which were spawned from Super Sentai and Kamen Rider. Well, in Kamen Rider Forze, the actress Sakata Rikako, she played the character of Miyu, who was like the cheerleader, typical obnoxious cheerleader who's a good guy. She's a supporting cast member and popular character now. But her actress is from Saga, and, she's appeared in different you know, tokusatsu things. She's appeared in Super Sentai a few times, not as a ranger, but in supporting cast. But in Super Sentai, the the actor uh, Makoto Naoya, he is from Saga, and he is the original Akarenja from Himitsu Sentai Go Ranger. So I think that is, that's a pretty good thing for Saga, but nobody really cares about any of that unless you're into that. So some places to visit while you're down there, if you ever go down there, would be Saga Castle. It's one of the very few flatland castles that's survived. It did have a fire at some point, and but it's been rebuilt and it's back to its original design. Um, I've been there a few times. Fantastic! It's great. It's not. It doesn't look like a typical Japanese castle. Like if you go to Osaka Castle or Hiroshima Castle, they look alike. Even Kagoshima, or no, not Kagoshima, Kumamoto. Uh, those castles all look alike. So Saga Castle kind of stands out and it looks a little unique in that respect. Um, and you have Yoshinogari, which is a massive Yayoi era, settlement. I've been there as well. Um, so if you are into that type of thing, you can go to those types of places. Um, they don't like they don't feel touristy. I mean, mainly because there's not a lot of tourists that go to Saga, to be honest. Um, but it's more like you do feel you kind of have this little feeling that you're actually stepping through time. When it sounds a little odd to say it like this, but if you actually experience it, then you will understand. Um, so, like I have mentioned that I have been to Saga. I used to live in Saga. I studied at Saga University for a time. Um, Life, moved slowly, and I loved it. Um, I had walked the narrow streets near campus, and just to kind of get a feel for real Japan. And that's one of the things I loved about Saga. It was real Japan. A lot of people who come to Japan, they always go to those same places, and I think I mentioned this before in my last uh, episode. Um, but they they always go to the same places, and so when I say I went to Saga or I lived in Saga, people don't know where that is. Granted, people think that everything is close to Tokyo. It's not. So living in Saga, it's strictly countryside. It's wonderful. I loved it. Um, so walking through these narrow streets that have no business being two-way streets, but for some reason they are. Uh, just you'd pass just these weathered homes and these small hidden temples between the alleys, and you got the smell of rain and old stone, and it was just very peaceful and isolated. But for me, you know, in that space, like you hear things, you hear stories, you hear whispers of the past, and you learn a lot about real Japan. And Saga doesn't really scream its history, not in the same way that you have Hiroshima or even Nagasaki, which is next door to Saga. Saga whispers its history. Its history helped shape Japan, and in an unknowing way. For people who don't know, you Japanese history in depth. They only have people may only have a rough understanding of Japanese history outside of World War II. Well, Saga helped shape that. Um, so yeah, that's Saga in a rough nutshell. Uh, I don't really want to talk too much about a particular prefecture because I could go on. I could make this episode ungodly long, and I don't want to do that because of who I mentioned before. Saga. I had a great time living there. I'd like to go back. It's a feels like an irrelevant, forgotten prefectures of ghosts and rebellions, and it's not flashy. But once you go there, you'll realize that it's unforgettable. Once you've seen past everything. But now I think that storm is moving in, and something else maybe. Well, if I stop transmitting, what the hell did I just say? Transmitting? Well, you'll know why if I stop transmitting. So I can hear her lurking outside. Well, in any case, this has been the Tayori Sensei, speaking to you from nowhere. So until next time, beware of the tall woman in white. And remember, don't trust everything that smiles.